Alright, in this first installment of Kowalski analysis, I'm gonna take a look at South America and give some tips on all the different countries with coverage. And yeah, we'll see how it goes. So I'm gonna go top to bottom, north to south, starting with Colombia. First, let's take a look at the coverage. So as you can see, almost all of the coverage is located on the west side, the northwest side of Colombia. There's next to no coverage in the rainforest, except for this part of coverage that is right next to the Andes on the east side, and this little bit of coverage in Leticia, which is pretty fun to know. It might net you some points when you get it at some point. This is the car. You can see it's like an open roof and you can see this guy. It has other Colombian metas. There's a yellow plate, for example, but that's not really important to know. The big thing to know is that most of the coverage is northwest of the Andes. So the first real clue that I want to bring up is the license plates. In Colombia, you're gonna find that all normal vehicles will have yellow plates, both on the back and on the front. And special vehicles, commercial vehicles like taxis and buses, they have just white normal plates. It's not uncommon to see a lot of white plates, but you should see some yellow plates when you're in Colombia. And in this particular case, it's everywhere. It's just Bogota, so there's a lot of yellow plates. But just keep in mind that white plates can be found, so you might get a bait round at some point with like a bus or a taxi that has a white plate. Here's just a typical scene of a highway in Colombia. The main thing to note here is the Colombian cross on the back of the sign. That's a famous tip. So when you get like the bar crossing over, supporting the sign, that's a Colombian thing. Another Colombian thing is, wow, my arrow is really big, is how these signs, these chevrons, are supported by two signposts. You can see that quite a lot. It's not always. You can see singular signposts, but if you see two, you're very likely to be in Colombia. Then a last thing on this round is that the bottom of this pole is painted with black and yellow, but it can also be orange and yellow. Another tip here, Colombia is the only country where you will find a black car with a stubby antenna. So that's just a really simple tip. If you see a black car with a stubby antenna, you're gonna be in Colombia. There's no other stubby antenna countries that use a black car. Here's a Colombian road marker. It says PR on top. It's not like the name of a region or a province. It's just a provincial ruta, I think that it stands for. I don't exactly know what the format is, but you will see these a lot with like PR and a number. Yeah, there's another bus with a white license plate and yellow plates on this vehicle. And there in the distance you can also see like another sign supported by two signposts. A lot of them actually. And a last disclaimer actually for Colombia is that you can also find octagonal poles here, just like in Mexico. They are quite common. You can see them on some rounds. You can find these and also like just normal round poles. So just keep an eye out for that. If you see octagonal poles, it doesn't necessarily mean that you are in Mexico. Okay, moving over to Ecuador. Ecuador is a generally pretty hard South American country to guess correctly. It can look a lot like Mexico in certain locations, but let's just go over the basic tips. A first tip here is that commercial vehicles like buses and taxis and special vehicles will have a orange license plate in Ecuador. Note also the use of a stubby antenna on the car. It's very rare to see a Ecuadorian location without a stubby antenna. So if you see a stubby antenna and orange license plates, you're gonna be in Ecuador like 90% of the time. On normal vehicles, the license plates are less remarkable. They're just white, but they're quite short, so that's why they can be mistaken for Mexican plates. And this is just a typical Ecuadorian round with quite a view over Quito, I think. Yeah, we're in Quito. One thing to keep in mind is that there is a certain region of Ecuador that looks very different from the rest of the country. If you go over to the map again, this part of Ecuador is desert-like, and we can see that here, very dry and very deserty. The way you could differentiate this from, for example, northern Mexico, is the use of double guardrails, like they are stacked here. For the rest, this round doesn't really have any major clues, just the double stacked guardrails. This is a typical Andes round in Ecuador. Things to note here, the bollards, they have like 2 red strips. It's very common for bollards in Ecuador to have 2 reflectors. You can find them in a lot of different designs, but it's very common to have 2 reflectors. And here's another typical Ecuadorian round. We can see another design of the Ecuadorian bollard with 2 reflectors, but this time they're a lot thinner. And another thing to note here is the use of a concrete road. Ecuador uses a lot of concrete roads, so just keep that in mind. Okay, Peru. Peru is a very large country, but as you can see, its coverage is quite limited to the west side of the Andes. There's this little stretch in Iquitos that can look quite distinctive. It feels Amazonian, and there's a lot of rickshaws about, but that's not unlike the rest of Peru, of course. You just need to get a feel of this area, really, to get it right. But it's quite hard. In this section, we're just gonna focus on the big clues to differentiate Peru from its neighboring countries. On our first round, we're in Lima, just in Lima. And the first thing to note here is the use of a black and white striped signpost. That's very common in Peru. Another thing to note is the white license plates. Normal vehicles just have the white plates, but commercial vehicles will have like a bright yellow one. It's piss colored, actually. It's piss colored license plate. And the architecture of Peru and Bolivia is also pretty distinctive. Like you have these brick facades. That's very common in Peru and in Bolivia. Okay, this is a typical Peruvian high altitude round in a mining town. As you can see, there's a little bit of graffiti saying Minero, so that gives away that it's a mining town, of course, and you find those a lot in Peru. As you can see, the road is also concrete, so they also do that here. Another thing to note is this concrete pole. You have like 3 segments going in the same direction. They look not unlike those found in Argentina. In Argentina, they would often be on both sides, so they would stick out on both sides. In Peru, you can only find them sticking out of one side. The bottom of the pole is also painted. That's pretty common in Peru. And just the feel, you have like these enormous mountains in the distance, and it feels pretty dry and high up. Okay, and the last thing we're gonna cover is, of course, the rickshaws. There's a lot of rickshaws in Peru. You will find them almost everywhere in the country. And yeah, if you're in an urban round in a more rural city, you will find a lot of rickshaws about. And another thing is these boxes that you will see on the facades of houses. They're like dark gray boxes, and they often have 2 or 3 or 4 slits in them. Those are electricity counters. Let's see if we can find a better example. This is another one. Almost every house has them, and they're really indicative of Peru. Even if you're like in a really remote part and you don't have a lot of clues about, if you look at a facade and you see like a gray box, you can be pretty sure that you are in Peru. Okay, moving over to Bolivia. Bolivia is very partially covered. There's not a lot of coverage in the north and in the east of the country. Most of it is situated in and around the Andes. So La Paz, Cochabamba, Oruro, Sucre, Santa Cruz. Those are the big cities that are covered, and there's some roads between them that are also covered. If you're on the southwest side of the Andes, you're gonna find that the coverage is really dry. That's a really dry part of Bolivia. You can also see that on the map, of course. This part is colored in green, this part is colored in brown. So that's basically desert. On the east side of the Andes, however, you're gonna find that it looks quite a lot like Brazil in some aspects. Like, it feels forested, and you can see like Amazonian looking trees and just green landscapes all around. Major roads that lead through this area that are covered are the four, from Cochabamba through Santa Cruz over to here. It's only covered up to here in San Jose de Chiquitos, and the 9 running from Santa Cruz down to Villamontes. You can use the road angle sometimes to get a better feel for on which road you are. If you are going east to west, you're more likely to be on the 4 than the 9, of course, and vice versa. Okay, here's another example of that brick architecture I mentioned in the Peruvian part of the video. Also present in this round are the Bolivian electricity counters. They're white with like some part of like they have a cage around them. It's like they're in a prison. They're imprisoned electricity counters, basically. And another thing here to note is that the license plates can sometimes have like a blue tinge to them. That's because the letters on a Bolivian license plate are dark blue. That's pretty unique in South America. Okay, this is a location on the 9, and the things to note here are the electricity poles. You have like this really wonky one that's very common in Bolivia. They make the electricity poles out of tree trunks that are not perfectly straight. And these massive concrete poles, those are also very common. They have like isolators on both sides, but they can also just have a bar on top. But the defining trait is that they're massive. So again here, like a really big pole. Those are found around Santa Cruz mainly. And this is a round on the 4, again, in the greener parts of the country. And one tip for differentiating the 4 from other parts, especially the part of the 4 that is west of Santa Cruz, is that you will see the Andes to your south. Because if you look at the map, we're around this part, here are mountains. Another thing that is very common in Bolivia is signposts that are made out of wood. That's another clue to differentiate it from Peru. And the car. In Bolivia, you're always gonna get a white Gen 3 car. In Peru, you can also find a Gen 3 black car. So that's a way to differentiate Peru from Bolivia. If you see a black car and you think, is this Bolivia? It ain't, because it's not a white car. Alright, Brazil is massive and it's fully covered. I'm not gonna go into the details about how to differentiate the different regions of Brazil. I'm just gonna cover some very big tips that can just get you the country and like the major regions. Alright, first thing to note, the license plates. In Brazil, you're gonna get, on older coverage, often just unremarkable white plates like this one. But they're long, so you can differentiate it from, for example, Ecuador or Mexico or Peru, because the plates are often longer. In the newer Gen 4 coverage, you're also gonna see this new type of plate, which has like a blue bar on top. Those are found in other South American countries in Gen 4 coverage, but especially in Brazil because you get a lot more of the Gen 4 coverage. And the last thing, commercial vehicles have a red license plate. You will see that plate a lot on trucks as well, and that helps a lot to differentiate it from other South American countries when you're in a rural location and you can just see a truck. This is a regional location, but first let's take a look at the pole. This is a typical Brazilian pole. It's made out of concrete and it will have like 3 to 5 sections on the bottom that are hollowed out, and then a row of dots on top of it. This one has 3, that one has more, I think. They can also be found in like other formats. They are not always this thick. This one seems thinner, for example. And one clue for the region is these roofs and these houses, this architecture. They're like brightly colored or white with a terracotta roof. Those are both traits of architecture that you will find in this northeastern part of Brazil. A last Brazilian round with a lot of tips. Firstly, this is a regional road. It says RJ159. If you look at the map of Brazil from above and you zoom out far enough, can you still do that? Wait. Okay. So if you zoom out far enough, you will see the names of the provinces are abbreviated, and those regional roads have those same abbreviations. So in this case, we're in the state of Rio de Janeiro on the 159, so you would be able to find that. Another clue for Brazil is the black back of the sign. Don't mind the crossbar here. It's not a Colombian cross because it's made out of wood for one. And there's just so many other clues that point to Brazil that you would never confuse it with Colombia. So yeah, the black back of the sign, basically almost all signs in Brazil will have a dark gray or black back to them. These are, again, Brazilian poles with like segments. And these chevrons are yellow on black. That's unique in South America. You can also find that in some countries in Europe, of course, but in South America, this is unique to Brazil. Moving on to Chile. Chile is a very long country, and it covers a lot of different geographical regions with different landscapes in them. So first, let's take a look at a northern Chilean round. The first thing to note is that it has wide road lines. There's only 2 countries in South America that will use exclusively wide road lines sometimes. The main one is Chile, and occasionally you can see wide road lines in Argentina. But another reason that this is Chile is the orange reflectors in the guardrail. It looks a lot like Spain in this one, actually. I would not blame you for confusing it with Spain, except for the poles, of course. These are Chilean poles. They look a lot like the Brazilian one, except that there's no sections. The bottom part is just completely hollowed out without any segments. Keep in mind also the landscape, like very dry and mountainous and sandy. Those are all traits of northern Chile. Okay, this is a Santiago round. The things I want to point out here are the car. You can see it is white with a black rim. That's the Gen 3 Chile car. You will never see a black or any other type of Gen 3 car in Chile. You will only see this one. Sometimes it's completely blurred. Sometimes you can see only the white part. But just keep in mind that this is the car, and you will see different variations of it on different parts of the coverage. This is a far south Chilean round, and as you can see, they use all yellow road lines here. That's common to see in like the far south of Chile and in national parks throughout the country. You can also find it up north, but if it's all yellow, you should be in Chile. And another thing to show is just the landscape. This is a typical Tierra del Fuego round with like the flowers, and it almost feels a bit Scottish or something. It's quite cold and green. Cold, lush green. That's basically southern Chilean vibes. Alright, Argentina. Argentina is almost as long as Chile. Almost all of its roads are covered. It's basically fully covered. So let's take a look at some clues. This is the first one. This is a typical Argentinian electricity pole. It's a very big one because it carries a lot of voltage, I suspect. This is a smaller example. It has like 2 concrete poles and some segments between them. That's basically what you will see most often in Argentina. You can also find examples with 1 concrete pillar and the segments coming off on both sides, but you will quite quickly get a hang of what Argentinian poles look like. This is a round concrete pole, for example, with a concrete bar on top. That's also Argentinian. If you see like the dip, it's not just a straight line. That's very Argentinian. These are some Argentinian plates. Because we're in Gen 4 coverage, we have this plate here. That's also a Argentinian plate. So if it was unblurred, it would say Argentina on top in the blue part. But because it's blurred, it just looks a lot like the Brazilian plate. This is an old Argentinian plate, and as you can see, it has a black dot in the middle. You can also see it on this car here and on this car here. It has a black dot in the middle, and that's indicative of Argentina. This is a typical central southern Argentinian round. You have a black car, a perfectly straight road through a barren landscape, and this is a Argentinian road marker with the route number on top. We're on the 10 in this case. Can we see that? Yeah, we're on the 10. And this is the kilometer number. This is another Argentinian round. Again, pretty far south. It's very flat, and we're in a town in this case. Argentinian light poles are pretty unique. They almost always have this shape to them. If you look at the first round, you can also see them. They are like pretty high, and then they take it like a corner. That's pretty unique in South America. And we can also take a closer look at the license plates. Here you can see the black dot in the middle again. Last but not least, Uruguay. It can look a lot like Argentina in certain locations, especially rural locations, but it definitely has its unique vibe to it. Most of the coverage is in the south because basically everyone lives there, and coverage up north is more sparse. The parts where people actually live are almost completely covered. It's about as well covered as Argentina. Okay, this is the essential Uruguay. This is such a good round. It has basically all the clues you could ask for in a rural Uruguayan round. You have the undulating hills. You have the pastures with cows in them. You have the groups of trees, which you can see here, there in the distance, and right next to us. You have these trident poles with like 3 isolators on top of a bar, and the middle one is even higher. We have the black car. We have center road lines, one white and a continuous yellow one. And this Uruguayan bollard right here. And last but not least, this white wooden signposts. It's wooden because it's thick like the Bolivian one. Those are just black dots that you can see on the poles in Uruguay. And this is in a urban Uruguay round. As you can see, it looks quite a lot like Argentina. But the main differentiating factor here is the license plates. They're just white. It's very unremarkable, just a white license plate, and the poles are square. A good thing to note also is that a lot of the coverage in Uruguay, let's take another one, I hope this one, yeah, good. A lot of the coverage in Uruguay is overcast coverage, so you will see a lot of clouds. It's pretty rare to see this sunny of around in Montevideo and in the countryside, but it's not that uncommon. Just keep in mind that overcast coverage is very common in Uruguay. Okay, so we basically covered every country in South America now. So let's just play a quick game of South America and see which clues we come into contact with, which clues we find. Okay, this is a Brazil round. You have the red license plate on the truck here. Center yellow road lines, that is indicative of the Americas, so that helps if you're looking for the continent. This pole is also Brazilian. It has the segments, you can see the shadows of them, and this dark red soil, which does feel like more southern Brazil. So let's take a look. It's very southern Brazil. On this round, again, some clues. The yellow license plate here on the bike. This pole has an orange, black, orange painted bottom. Just round poles here, but the main thing is, of course, the yellow license plates. I'm thinking this is just near Bogota or Medellin. Oh, okay, it's super north. This is a hard round. We have no car. Wow, that's a lot of grows. Let's look at the license plates. Feels unremarkable, really. This is basically just soil guessing at this point. The orange soil should be Brazil. There's not many other countries in the Americas that use orange, that have this orange soil. Maybe Panhandle, Argentina, maybe Uruguay in the north, but this should just be Brazil, and it is, but it's far northeast. Okay, here we have what I think is it's an Argentinian round. Again, we have those light poles here. They're colored even. The black car, and this license plate has like a black dot. This one as well. That one as well. Typical Argentinian round. Not much else to say. It feels like Uruguay, so maybe close to it. Rosario. Nope, it's all the way in the middle of nowhere. And this last round, concrete road, hilly, white license plates. This one is more difficult. Just based on the hilly town, I'm just thinking somewhere in Ecuador, but I could also see like northern Peru maybe. Do we see any electricity counters? We do not. That helps. That helps. I'm pretty sure now that it's Ecuador. Yeah, it's Ecuador. Alright, not the best region guesses, but the main thing is that we got the country right each time, and the clues helped us to get those countries right. Alright, see you guys in the next one.